I never planned to tell this story out loud. For years it stayed tucked away in the back of my mind, only resurfacing every December when the air turned cold and the nights felt longer than they should. I live in the Midwest now, far from where it happened, but every Christmas Eve I still catch myself listening more carefully to the sounds inside my house, especially after midnight. This happened when I was 16, during what should have been a quiet Christmas in rural Pennsylvania, in a town so small most people only knew it because of the highway exit number. We were staying at my grandparents' house, the same place we went every year. It was an old two-story farmhouse surrounded by bare trees and open fields, the kind of place where winter makes everything feel exposed and silent. My grandfather had passed away earlier that year, and even though no one said it outright, everyone felt his absence. He was the kind of man who filled a room just by sitting in it, and without him, the house felt hollow, like something important had been removed but never replaced. We arrived 2 days before Christmas. The house smelled like pine cleaner, old wood, and the faint sweetness of whatever my grandmother had been baking all day. Decorations were already up when we walked in, more than usual. My grandmother had always reused the same ornaments every year, things older than I was, but that year there were new ones mixed in. Handmade wreaths, unfamiliar figurines, small wooden decorations placed on shelves and windowsills. I remember noticing them but not thinking much of it at the time. Grief does strange things to people, and I assumed she was trying to distract herself. That first night passed without incident, but I slept poorly. The house made noises I didn't remember, soft creaks and pops that seemed louder than they should have been. I chalked it up to the cold. On Christmas Eve, the weather turned worse. Snow started falling in the afternoon and didn't stop. By nightfall, the world outside was completely still, blanketed in white. After dinner, the adults sat around the living room drinking coffee and talking quietly while Christmas music played low in the background. I remember feeling tired but restless, like my body wanted to sleep but my mind refused to slow down. Around 11, my parents told me to head upstairs. I was sleeping in the guest room, the same one my grandfather used when he was sick and couldn't climb the main stairs. I didn't like that room much, but I never said anything. It felt colder than the rest of the house, no matter how high the heat was turned up. The room was small, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a single window facing the backyard. My grandmother had put a small wooden figurine on the dresser. It was carved from dark wood, shaped like a little man wearing a long coat and a pointed hat. It wasn't smiling, but it wasn't frowning either. The face was blank in a way that made it hard to look at for too long. I assumed it was another decoration she'd bought recently. I changed into my pajamas, turned off the light, and climbed into bed, telling myself not to be ridiculous. I don't know how long I slept before the noise woke me. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I realized it was coming from inside the room. A soft tapping sound, irregular, like something lightly knocking against wood. I stayed still, listening. The sound came again, closer this time, from near the floor. I held my breath, my eyes fixed on the dark shape of the dresser. The tapping stopped, replaced by a faint scraping sound, slow and deliberate. I told myself it was the house settling, that old houses do this all the time, but the explanation didn't sit right. The sound felt intentional, like something testing its surroundings. Then I noticed the dresser looked different. The top felt emptier somehow. I sat up slightly and squinted through the darkness. The wooden figurine was gone. My stomach tightened. I scanned the floor, expecting to see it lying on its side, but there was nothing there. That's when I heard it again, the scraping sound, now directly beneath the bed. It moved from one side to the other, unhurried, as if whatever was down there wasn't concerned about being discovered. I froze. I didn't want to look, but the urge was overwhelming. Slowly, I leaned over the side of the bed and looked down. I didn't see a face. I saw the edge of the wooden figurine's coat first, then its small boots, positioned upright as if it were standing. It was under the bed, facing me. The space was too dark to see details, but I could tell it hadn't fallen there by accident. It was placed. I pulled back onto the bed, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid it would give me away. I told myself I was dreaming. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for the fear to fade. That's when I heard breathing. Not loud, not labored, just a faint, steady inhale and exhale coming from beneath the bed. It didn't sound human, but it didn't sound like an animal either. It was too controlled. Too calm. I covered my mouth with my hand, terrified I might make a noise. The breathing continued for what felt like minutes. Then, very slowly, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I felt watched, studied, like something was deciding what to do next. A soft voice broke the silence. It was low, rough, and close to the floor. "Are you asleep?" it asked. The words were careful, almost polite. I didn't respond. I didn't move. My entire body felt locked in place. The voice waited. I don't know how long passed before it spoke again. "He doesn't like being forgotten," it said. My grandfather's face flashed in my mind, and I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. The breathing returned, closer now, followed by the sound of something shifting, wood lightly scraping against wood. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the window, and for a moment everything felt normal. I sat up and looked at the dresser. The wooden figurine was back in its place, positioned exactly how it had been before. I checked under the bed. Nothing. No figurine. No signs of movement. I told myself it had been a nightmare, brought on by stress and grief. I almost believed it. At breakfast, I asked my grandmother about the figurine. She looked confused. She said she didn't own anything like that. She insisted she hadn't put any decorations in that room at all. My parents exchanged a look but said nothing. No one wanted to ruin Christmas morning. We opened gifts, laughed, tried to enjoy ourselves. But I couldn't stop thinking about the voice, about what it said. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I made an excuse and slept on the couch. We left the next day. As we were packing the car, I glanced back at the house one last time. For a brief moment, I thought I saw someone standing in the upstairs window, watching us leave. A small figure, perfectly still. After that Christmas, I thought I had left everything behind in that old farmhouse. And when I looked again, the strange figurine was empty. The voice, the presence that had made the night feel alive with eyes I couldn't see. I didn't need to. But over the next few weeks, once the snow melted and January began, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. At first, they were small, almost imperceptible, a fleeting shadow at the edge of the hallway, a faint sound like something scratching at the window when no wind was blowing. I would wake up in the middle of the night and see the hallway lit in a pale glow from the streetlights outside, only to realize the shadow had vanished the second I looked directly at it. My parents didn't notice anything, my sister didn't notice anything, and I said nothing. I thought maybe I was still imagining things, that my mind had stitched together memories from that night into a lingering fear. But one evening, about a week after we returned from Pennsylvania, I realized it wasn't imagination. It was Christmas Eve again, though the house was quiet and unadorned, nowhere near as festive as at my grandparents'. The tree sat in the corner, half decorated, ornaments from the previous year, some broken, some missing hooks. I was alone in the living room, unpacking a box of decorations, when I heard the faintest echo of music coming from outside. At first I thought it was the neighbor's radio, muffled by the walls. But then I realized the melody was unmistakable, a carol, soft, slow, and off-key. It was being sung, a single voice, broken and thin, like someone far away trying to remember the lyrics. I froze. The voice stopped when I strained to listen. I waited, thinking maybe it was just the wind, but then it started again, closer this time. And that's when I noticed movement in the shadows at the edge of the living room. A small figure, hunched, moving cautiously across the yard. I couldn't make out details at first, only that it moved in a way no normal person moves, like the rhythm of its limbs was slightly wrong, forced. I crouched behind the couch, trying not to breathe, trying not to make a sound. It paused in the middle of the lawn, then turned its head as if sensing my eyes. I couldn't see a face, only the outline of a small, bundled figure in dark clothing, a pointy hat or hood that gave the shape of a triangle. Its hands were too long, too narrow, dangling unnaturally at its sides. It didn't move closer, didn't retreat. It just stayed there, silent, letting the wind play over the snow. Then it spoke, in a voice that made my stomach twist, a whisper carried across the yard, "Why aren't you asleep?" Not a question, not a threat, but a statement filled with patience, as if it had been waiting for an answer my body could not give. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The voice lingered, echoing slightly off the side of the house. "He remembers you," it said. And then it was gone, vanished into the shadows so fast it was impossible to track with my eyes. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind, every shadow cast by the moonlight made me flinch. In the morning, I tried to convince myself it had been some neighborhood kid, playing a trick, or perhaps an animal mistaken for a figure in the dark. But the way it moved, the way it spoke, the almost deliberate awareness of my presence, nothing in my 16 years had taught me that any child, or even an adult, could do what I had just witnessed. I tried to forget, pushed it deep, avoided the living room entirely for the rest of the day. But that night, the sound returned, only louder. Not singing, this time, but a scraping, a dragging, something moving across the porch. I peeked through the blinds and saw it again, the same hunched figure, inching along the snow, leaving footprints that were too small to belong to any adult and too long and narrow to belong to any child. Its head turned toward me, and I thought I caught the glimmer of something pale in the dark, a face maybe, or a reflection of the moon on something unnatural. It spoke again, slower this time, almost deliberate. "He told me to find you." I didn't know what it meant. My mind screamed to call for my parents, but my voice wouldn't work. I was paralyzed with fear. The figure moved closer, to the edge of the porch, then stopped, just far enough away that I could see the tips of its hands clutching something wooden, dark, shaped like a small doll. The air grew cold, unnatural, as if the night itself had thickened. I could hear the wood scrape lightly against the snow as it moved. My throat tightened, my body shaking, but before I could process, it turned suddenly and vanished into the yard, leaving nothing but footprints. I ran to the window, but the snow had already begun to fill in the tracks, erasing all evidence that it had ever been there. The next morning, I found something at the doorstep. A small wooden doll, nearly identical to the figurine at my grandparents', dressed in dark cloth with a pointed hat. I froze. My parents didn't notice it at first, and when I picked it up, the wood was icy, heavier than it looked, polished but rough in all the wrong places. There was no message, no note, no clue as to who had left it there. Only the presence of something that shouldn't exist, something that knew me. I tucked it away in my room, trying to ignore it, but I couldn't. That night, it returned. Only this time it wasn't outside. I woke to the soft tap-tap-tap of wood against the floorboards. I sat up in bed and saw it, the doll, upright, at the foot of my bed. My door was closed, locked even, and I had no memory of opening it. The doll stared at me, featureless face catching the moonlight through my blinds. My heart pounded. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, like someone drumming their fingers on a desk. Then it moved. Slowly, unnaturally, toward the side of the bed. I tried to scream, my voice caught in my throat. My body refused to move. The doll climbed onto the bed, climbing toward me. I could feel its presence pressing against my legs. The room temperature dropped sharply. I felt breath, cold and dry, across my ankles. Then it stopped. Silence. And a whisper, closer than before, "You remembered me." My mind spun. I didn't remember anyone, I couldn't remember anything beyond the last Christmas. And then I realized, it wasn't asking a question. It was stating a fact. I hadn't forgotten. I had forgotten nothing. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't dare move. I waited for dawn as if holding my breath might keep the doll from doing something worse. When the first rays of sun touched the room, it disappeared. The doll sat where I had left it, perfectly in place, wooden hands resting unnaturally at its sides. My parents didn't notice a thing when they passed my room. I didn't mention it. I knew they wouldn't understand, wouldn't believe. Over the next week, strange things kept happening, cold spots moving through the house, whispers in the kitchen when no one else was home, shadows that lingered where no light should reach. I never left my room after dark. Each night, the same voice, same slow movement, same haunting awareness that I was being watched. And each morning, the doll returned to the same spot, the same position, the same blank face staring as if waiting for a response I could never give. By the time Christmas approached again, I could feel the anticipation building. I avoided the living room, stayed in my room, locked doors, windows, everything I could. But the presence didn't care. It waited. It had patience I had never seen in a human being. It was no longer just a figurine or a shadow in the yard. It was aware of me. It wanted something from me, and I had no idea what. That Christmas, I stayed awake all night, eyes glued to the door, listening. Tapping, dragging, whispering. And I realized, with a clarity that made my blood run cold, that whatever this thing was, it wasn't leaving. It couldn't leave. Not until it was finished. That Christmas morning, I woke to the sunlight slanting across my bed, but the warmth didn't reach me. The room felt heavy, loaded with the silence of something watching. I thought maybe it had left overnight, maybe I had dreamt the events of the past week. But then I noticed the doll. It wasn't on the floor, not on my desk, not even on my dresser. It was standing upright on the windowsill, facing outward, staring into the yard. Its blank eyes seemed almost purposeful, unblinking, calculating. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow casting the impression of movement. But when I leaned closer, I could feel the chill in the air, the faint vibration of something alive, like it had drawn its presence into the wood itself. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. I just stared at it, watching as slowly, impossibly slowly, the head of the doll tilted to the side, as if listening, and then it moved. Not walking, not stepping, but sliding, gliding, a crooked, jerky motion that shouldn't have been possible. It crossed the floor toward me, dragging tiny feet, leaving no mark on the wooden boards. The hair on my arm stood up, my stomach twisted, and my throat burned with the effort of holding back a scream. And then it spoke, not in the whisper from before, but louder, clearer, as if it had learned how to form words in my own voice. "You didn't invite him." I froze. My mind reeled. Who? What? The doll stopped at the edge of my bed, hands stretched unnaturally, resting on the frame. Then a shadow grew across the room, the outline of a figure in a top hat, tiny, hunched, but taller than the doll itself. It moved with deliberate slowness, a rhythm like footsteps in snow, uneven but controlled, a cadence that made my heart stutter. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't. My body was locked. The shadow stepped closer, into the light, and I saw it clearly now. Its face wasn't human, it was twisted, pale, almost melting, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce straight through me. Its mouth opened, and it sang. Not a carol, not the familiar tune, but a warping, distorted melody that sounded like someone trying to remember Christmas songs after decades of forgetting. And every note, every wrong chord, resonated in the room as if the air itself were vibrating. The doll beside me shivered, almost like it was reacting to the presence of this thing. And then, suddenly, the shadow crouched and gestured toward me. Its voice was low, grinding, almost a rasp. He remembers, he must come. My heart stopped. I knew instantly who he was, even though I didn't want to think it. The old figure from my grandparents' house, the presence I had fled from, the thing I had glimpsed in the yard, was connected. It wasn't just a haunting of one night, it had followed me, waiting, patient, cunning. It was the same presence, older, stronger, more aware, and it wanted me to act. I could feel the weight of it pressing into me, like ice melting into my skin. My eyes darted to the window, any escape, but the snow outside seemed to deepen, darken, as if the world itself conspired to trap me. I tried to speak, tried to call for my parents, but the sound was gone. Only the song continued, low and warping, the shadow dancing on the walls, growing larger, stretching impossibly high, twisting into the corners of the room. I realized then that the doll wasn't just a warning or a lure. It was an invitation, a key, a signal. And I had ignored it. The shadow leaned closer. Its eyes bored into me, and for a moment, I felt something like recognition, like it knew me, like it had always known me. Then it spoke again, this time with a strange, almost mournful tone. You left him behind. You didn't bring him. And in that instant, I understood. The doll had been the messenger, the shadow the executor, and whatever he was, the thing that haunted the edges of memory and snow, it wanted the one thing I had failed to bring, acknowledgement, remembrance. Fear gripped me, froze me in place. The doll tapped my leg once, twice, and then stopped. The shadow hovered, bending the light around it, a grotesque parody of Christmas caroling, waiting, expectant. I wanted to deny it, to refuse, to close my eyes, but my curiosity, my terror, my guilt, it all combined into a fragile bridge of reason. Who is he? I whispered finally, voice shaking. The shadow paused, then straightened, tilting its head like a bird listening to an unseen sound. And in the room, the temperature dropped so sharply that frost began forming on the window pane. Its voice came again, quiet now, almost intimate, as if sharing a secret. He never left. You did. He waits in the shadows of the past, in the spaces between your memories, in the songs forgotten and the gifts unwrapped. He waits for you to remember. Only then, it trailed off, but the implication was clear. The doll moved first, sliding back toward the window, then across the floor, gliding toward the hallway, leaving a trail of frost in its wake. I followed, drawn by a force I couldn't resist, heart pounding in my ears. The shadow didn't move, only watched, looming at the edge of the room, a predator patient for centuries. I entered the hallway, then the living room, where the tree still stood, half-decorated, lights flickering weakly. The shadow followed now, not moving, but present, bending the edges of reality around it. And there, beneath the tree, was a small box I didn't recognize. I hadn't left it there. The doll stopped beside it. I lifted the lid, heart in my throat, and inside lay a tiny figurine, perfectly carved, almost identical to the one I had seen at my grandparents', but darker, twisted, its expression just barely hinting at malice. I understood then, this wasn't a toy, it wasn't decoration, it wasn't meant for children. It was a vessel. And it was mine to carry, mine to remember, mine to confront. I touched it, and a wave of cold washed through me, images flashing in my mind, my grandparents' house, the first Christmas, the underpants trees, the dreams, the whispers, all converging into one living memory, one long shadow stretching across decades. And then the song began again, faint at first, growing louder, not from the shadow, not from the doll, but inside my head. A carol I had never known, yet understood perfectly. The lyrics were wrong, jumbled, sinister, but unmistakably joyful, in some twisted way. I fell to my knees, clutching the figurine, shivering, but then I felt something shift. The shadow leaned closer one last time, and I sensed it observing, weighing, judging. And then, with a final whisper, it said, "You remembered." The chill lifted slightly, the song faded into silence, and the doll collapsed to the floor, inert, as if the spell had broken. The shadow receded, melting into the walls, the corners, the snow outside, and for the first time in days, I was alone. Trembling, exhausted, I sat there, clutching the twisted figurine, unsure if it was truly gone or simply waiting for another year, another night, another Christmas to awaken. That day, the tree stayed half-decorated. The house seemed warmer, quieter, but I never forgot the way the shadow had moved, the way the doll had communicated, the song that played in my mind. That Christmas passed, then another, then another. But every year, when the lights go up, when carols start to play, when snow begins to fall, I feel the presence again, faintly, in the corner of my vision, waiting. And I know, deep down, that one day it will return, demanding that I remember what I tried to forget, demanding that I finally confront what waits beneath the surface of Christmas cheer. I keep the figurine hidden now, locked away in a box far from the living room, far from my bed, far from any window. And every year, on Christmas Eve, I hear it again, a faint tapping, a whisper, a melody just out of reach, reminding me that some stories don't end when you leave the house, that some shadows travel with you, patiently, quietly, through the years. And so, every December, I sit alone in the dark, listening, waiting, knowing that the next carol, the next shadow, the next touch of frost, may come again, and I will have to face it, or risk forgetting forever.